Hello and welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail C. Martin, and tonight we are talking about dragon romance. But first, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Ari.
I'm McKay, and with my writing partner, Rachel Langella, we write across all genres of romance, and we publish as Ari is contemporary, and for Rachel is where we put our paranormal.
Very good. Kiki.
Hi, I'm Kiki Burrelli. I write gay paranormal romance for about 6 years now, and yeah, that's me.
Okay, Elle.
Hi, I'm LR Lamb, and I've previously published science fiction and fantasy across the various subgenres, but my next book is a dragon romance / epic fantasy blend called Dragonfall, which is out in May through Daw Books.
Very nice. Rachel.
I'm Rachel Langella, and I write with Ari. And as she said, we write male paranormal romance, the series behind me, the Asheville Arcana. And we're both fascinated with dragons.
Very good. Alledria.
Hi, I'm Alledria Hurt, and I am a writer across many genres. My most recent dragon romance is called The Dragon Prince, and that is basically a YA retelling of The Little Mermaid with dragons.
Fun.
Ooh, fun. And I'm Gail C. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. I have not yet ventured into having dragon romance, although I do write a shifter series. So I'm going to ask a lot of questions because I have a lot to learn here from those of you who have ventured ahead. And the first question is, when did you fall in love with dragons? And what was the first dragon you remember going, whoa, not necessarily in a sexy way, but just these things are really cool? Ari?
Oh, that's easy. Dragon Riders of Pern. I've read McCaffrey since I was a very, very small child. And of course, who wouldn't love, all the sexy dragon riders vying for the one queen? So of course, Ramoth is, my first dragon. So that's where I started.
Okay. Kiki.
I think my are we answering what my first dragon was, or like the first one?
Did you fall in love with?
Mine was in the it's in the Jeweled King's Curse. I do know what books I've read or written. It was book one in that, and Dimitri was my first dragon guide. It was a lot of fun because it was basically, it seemed like the billionaires of shifters is what dragons felt like in those first books, and they still kind of feel like that.
What dragon that you encountered earlier in your life made you fall in love with the idea of dragons?
Oh, that dragon. For me, there's not, and it's really hard for me because there's never like just one, the dragons in Game of Thrones or the dragons in other like popular media. What I love about dragons is that it's just such a wide array of what the dragons are doing there, what their powers are. So I'm going to say every.
Okay, that works. Elle?
For me, also, Dragon Riders of Pern was incredibly formative, especially the kind of YA one that had Melanie, who had like the little tiny lizard lanes, and she sang to them, and it was very, very pro. Like 12-year-old me was very, very into that. And then the other dragons I really loved were Robin Hobbs from the Realm of the Elderling series, which I'm also obsessed with. And then more recently, I loved Seraphina by Rachel Hartman and Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon.
Okay. Rachel?
Dragon Riders, I think, probably was my first romantic exposure. But I mean, if you really want to go back to the OG dragon, Pete's Dragon, the Disney movie. I was obsessed with that when I was a kid. I saw it in the theater because I'm that old, and I just absolutely loved it. And then another one that really stuck with me was Eustace when he got turned into a dragon in the Narnia Chronicles. There's something very visceral about the scene where he had to peel off his dragon body himself that just stuck with me. So I think those probably were my first two formative dragons.
Okay. How about you, Alledria?
Of course, Dragon Riders of Pern was probably the first time I saw dragons and humans together. But, excuse me, furry baby. But the dragon that literally like makes dragons for me is called Morculeb the Black. And he's from Barbara Hambly's Dragon's Bane.
Mhm.
It
That was a good series.
was.
Well, I'm with you with, definitely with early influences, Pete's Dragon. And, I'll be honest, I wish I could have a pet dragon like Mushu in Mulan. I mean, wouldn't that be so cool just to have a pet magic dragon? I also really liked Smaug in The Hobbit, even before Benedict Cumberbatch did the voice, just because he was such a quintessential dragon. And I think the first time I ever saw the Chinese dragon kites, the sinuous ones with the mustaches and the whiskers or whatever they are, and saw those, I thought, oh man, somebody somewhere saw a real dragon and made those kites out of it. They have to be real. So I think all of that just piled on to say dragons, yes. So how did you go from, say, Pete's Dragon, Dragon Riders of Pern, to let's do sexy dragons? Ari?
Oh, well, we were invited we'd always considered writing dragons. And it had not come up as a shifter because we had so many other things we were writing. And then when we were approached to participate in Magic Emporium by Megan Maslow, we were thinking it's like, oh, we have this character, Bear, who was the little brother of one of our previous characters in Asheville Arcana. And it's like, why don't we stick him with a dragon? I mean, we had already known that the particular character was a dragon. We just hadn't really thought about pairing him up with anybody. And then it was like, okay, now this is the really good time to do this. So, it was we only wrote our first, dragon shifter in 2021, but yeah, but he's a biggie. He's a real biggie, and he's very important. And the character has been around since the beginning of Asheville Arcana. So yeah, that was kind of cool to do.
Okay. Kiki?
I feel like I came to dragons and sort of like that slippery slope of the shifter world. Like I started with wolves, writing wolves, and then lions and bears. And it's just, dragon was just, a natural progression of what comes next.
Okay, that makes sense. Elle?
Yeah, so Seraphina was the first time I'd read dragons that turned into humans, and then that led me to also looking into the myth, and you get a lot of like Eastern dragons can turn into humans, obviously, and Eastern European ones as well. And then I hadn't read much like dragon shifter romance. I didn't realize that was a subgenre until quite late, but I had read a lot of werewolf shifter romance, so that was definitely an influence. And so I really, in the pandemic, I was, in lockdown and quite bored, and I decided to write something that I really, really wanted to read. And so I really wanted like a proper, like meaty epic fantasy, but with a paranormal, like shifter romance smuggled inside of it. And so that's what I did.
Makes sense to me. Rachel?
To build on what Ari said, the book in question was Stop Dragging My Heart Around. And the dragon shifter was Gus, who made his first appearance in the very first Asheville Arcana book. And we knew his secret back then, and he's just sort of been a background recurring character throughout the series until he finally got to be a leading man. I really think it was inevitable that we got to dragons because we've done ghosts, we've done werewolves, other types of shifters, vampires, angels, demons, everything. You know, it was just a matter of time until we got around to the dragons.
Okay, Alledria.
I have always been fascinated by dragons, and I've written quite a few different things with dragons in them. So I guess it kind of got to the point where I was like, okay, so how haven't I explored this concept? So it's like, okay, I haven't explored the concept of how do dragons love? Okay, let's write a book about how dragons love.
Okay. Now, I know several people have previously written shifter books. Is there anything different about writing dragons as instead of writing the usual, you know, wolf, big cat, possum, squirrel, as it goes? All right.
Well, we made ours different. Now, part of what Rachel and I both come from a D&D background. We have both been totally geeked out on that for many, way too many years. My D&D goes back to pre-1980, so that's how long I've been in it. So dragons as actual shifters going between human and human and dragon form was something that is, of course, all over D&D. So what we decided to do as part of Asheville Arcana is explore a concept that's been brought up in some kind of crossover kind of science fiction fantasy stuff about conservation of mass, because it's like, matter can be neither created nor destroyed. So how do these enormous dragons become people and vice versa? So we leaned hard into that and said that the whole reason a dragon has a horde is because that's where his body comes from. So your dragon's horde will influence his final form. So Gus is a gold dragon. So yeah, he really leans hard into the gold. So he actually has a metal affinity. But so it was really interesting about the fact that, his bar that he runs in Asheville, the whole entire foundation is made of gold because that's where he keeps his hoard, because he wants to live on top of it. But when he decides to go into his dragon form, yeah, the bar doesn't do so hot after that.
Okay, that's an interesting take. Kiki?
I keep saying I'm noticing that. It's a weird thing with dragons, because when I write wolf shifters or bear shifters, there's a certain element of, yeah, I could see that. That's an acceptable, thing to think someone could turn into. But for some reason, when you make it a dragon, it becomes a little less unacceptable, like a little bit more outstanding. So I feel like when you're writing them, when I am writing them, I took that into account and sort of felt this need to explain them more than I did with my bears turning into humans. Like that just seemed regular. But there's just something with dragons and just, how big and, just how they lend themselves to sort of these huge mythical universes that is different than regular shifters. See, I feel like rude, like I'm putting them regular, not regular. All shifters are the best shifters, obviously, but you know what I mean. I'm gonna shut up.
Now,
Yeah, I think like when you have a dragon, this is like proper fantasy. You can't really get more fantasy than dragon. So this is my first shifter, but I did do some fun world building. I went on a deep dive looking into lizard reproductive systems and how it works, that was a tangent, man. I recommend a deep dive on Wikipedia if you want to see some interesting things. And I decided to lift a couple. So in my world, the premise basically is like humans and dragons used to be this lovely symbiotic thing. Humans were, of course, terrible and stole dragons' magic and banished them to a dying world. Over the intervening centuries, they forgot this and they now worship their dragon. They worship dragons as gods. So it's basically, what if your gods actually really hated you because they didn't forget? And in this world that they were banished to, it's got a not so subtle climate change analogy, and it's slowly getting warmer. And the temperature can affect the sex of eggs. So I now have it that all dragons are hatching female, except for my main character, who's the last male dragon foretold to save his kind, but he's kind of starting out as a failed chosen one, and he's bitter about it.
Okay. Rachel.
I think in addition to, the whole conservation of mass aside, one of the things that made ours a little bit different was that we had to have Gus fit into the mythos of the sandbox that we were writing in, which draws very heavily from real world folklore. So we needed to have a reason for Gus, a dragon, to be in modern America. So we had to kind of look into, I believe it went Welsh. Yes. Welsh folklore, Welsh lineage, and brought that element in. And so that's where we grounded his background, and to fit him into the world with all the other characters and have it kind of make sense.
Okay. Alledria.
What was the question?
It was, if you've worked with shifters before, how are dragons different, or are they?
Oh, well, I don't think I've ever actually officially written shifters before. I've read a lot, though, so dragons differ to me in the simple fact that they are so much bigger. They are so much less what we would term realistic, because I don't think any of us has ever run up against a real dragon. So it would be one of those situations where all of a sudden an apex of apex predators is in your face. So that would make it a very different situation. As for the dragons that as the dragon community that I write, I kind of lifted from old school mythology, a little bit of Barbara Hamby's mythology, and a little bit of, I'm just going to hand wave you and make this up as I go along.
That's fair. And speaking of hand wavium, I was once on a convention panel where a couple of the panelists almost came to blows, debating how dragons could fly and what made them able to get their massive bodies off the ground with wings that varied in size, depending on the description. So have you thought about this, or do you just say, hand wavium, it's frickin' magic, IFM, we're not going to focus on the aerodynamics of this, dragons fly? There is no wrong answer. Ari?
We did not explain it. It is something that I thought about. Now, Gus, when he is, transformed, is the size of a 747. We actually, had that as an analogy and has an appropriate wingspan for that. But yeah, it's pretty much just magic.
Fair enough. Kiki?
Yeah, magic, just magic. Magic's the answer.
Works for me. Elle?
Yeah, I watched a couple of YouTube videos trying to figure out, like, are dragons aerodynamic? And it's where they like analyze the ones in various TV shows and films, which was interesting. But you quickly realize that the actual wingspan you'd need to even get close to getting them airborne is just astronomical. And my dragons, when they turn into a humanoid form, they also have dragons, because I did sexy fallen dragon angel basically is my concept. And they also would need absolutely ginormous wings. I decided to go bat wings, but with some feathers, because dinosaurs have feathers, so why not? And then, yeah, hand waved magic.
That works. Rachel,
Magic.
I was gonna say, does this keep you up at night? I did not realize people took this quite as seriously until that panel, and then we were just lucky to get out without bloodshed. Alledria?
Yeah, I having been in the academic community about dragons for quite a while, it is yeah. There are some very staunch people who are like dragons could actually fly, and those who are like, no, that literally physically would not happen. So I tend to, as far as flight is concerned and fire breathing and some of the what we call classical things about dragons, I literally just go, suspend your disbelief, it'll be okay.
I mean, it's
Fair- fair-
dragons.
If you can
So what's-
suspend it for Tolkien, you can suspend it for us.
So what's the hardest part about writing a dragon main character, or maybe what are some of the challenges of writing a dragon as a main character in a romance? Like not singeing his romantic partner at intimate moments or things?
Me
Mary?
first? Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, for our dragon, the biggest challenge was that, okay, so Gus is the last dragon in our world. Well, supposedly we will talk about an upcoming book that we have planned, but Gus is hiding, and he doesn't want anybody to know he's a dragon because dragons have been hunted, and so he's in hiding. So part of what we had as a challenge was less directly about him being a dragon, because of course when he's intimate with his mate, he's in human form, so no problem there. And his mate is also a fire mage who is basically immune to his breath weapon anyway. So we kind of covered the bases on that one. But what we had found as the challenge was letting out hints about what he was slowly enough, for somebody who might be reading the book and not knowing the background, or maybe even not suspecting from the title that he might actually be a dragon, to let out these hints and to have this explanation of how he covers his nature. Why does a magical detection spell not go, oh, dragon shifter? So there were these challenges of a character who was presenting himself as being other than he actually was. That other just happens to be a dragon.
Okay. Kiki?
For me, I think it was because my dragons happened in a shared world situation. It's really easy. I think Alledria was speaking about this earlier, of that to give dragons like all this power, to make them this apex predator, I think was your term. It's really easy to kind of make them these super overpowered characters, but when they're in a shared world, they have to be tempered. They have to, have the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities to make them so that you feel stress for them, and you feel like when they're in conflict, they're in actual conflict. I think for me is the hardest part.
Okay. Elle?
Yeah, so for mine, my main character, Everin, grew up in the dragon world, and then very dramatically in the first chapter falls to the human world and disguises himself as a human. And, they've been able to scry and spy on humans, but inconsistently. So he has some rather large gaps of how humanity works, which results in hilarious hijinks as he tries to pass for human and doesn't do a very good job at it. So that was sort of a challenge, because you need to have him be the fish out of water. You need him to be a bit alien. He's sort of a hunter, so he comes across as quite, furious and dangerous. He hates all humans at the start. So kind of challenging that journey of I hate this human to I want to have sex with this human. A difficult arc, but I had fun doing it overall.
Rachel?
To sort of build on what Ari said, the other part of the challenge was having a villain that could actually go after a dragon and have a decent chance of survival. That could not only find the dragon, but also have a decent chance of doing damage, surviving, etc. We had to think long and hard about how to create a character, our villain, who could do that in a way that made sense. And that was a pretty big challenge.
Yeah. Alledria.
I think the hardest part was the enemies to friends to lovers arc, because of course you're dealing with a completely, when you have I have a human mage and a dragon prince as my main characters, and they come from totally separate worlds where there is obvious aggression between the two, and he's in love, she's not so sure. So that was him convincing her of his interest is one of the major issues in the book.
Okay. I want to come back to something Kiki talked about, which was vulnerability. So regardless of what size your dragon is, you've got a creature that is, for all intents and purposes, immortal, extremely powerful, even if they're not all powerful. They can fly, they have claws, they have fire. How do you make them emotionally vulnerable to a mere mortal partner? And how do you realistically put them in some level of danger that wouldn't just destroy the rest of the world along with it? Ari?
2 words, fated mates. That, that was the easy part, because otherwise, we had it so that Gus, since he is in hiding and, doesn't want to get found by anybody who might be hunting dragons, he has not shifted in hundreds of years. And he, has lived at the same spot, not told anybody who or what he is. So his magic is still fairly powerful, but he's very careful not to exercise it in order to raise suspicions about who or what he might be. And as Rachel said, yes, we had the whole big challenge of coming up with a villain who could realistically threaten, this basically, once he shifted, almost invulnerable and super powerful creature. And that was really kind of hard to do. And it did take an awful lot of plotting on our part to come up with, plus the whole thing about having to put in, since we were writing in a shared element universe, putting in a way to bring in the shared element that we needed to put in and actually come up with an object that would save the day. And we were very, very happy with how it came out. But yeah, dragons, I mean, if our dragon had not been in hiding and trying to pretend to be something that, he just pretend to be a normal human, sure, he could have turned around and flamed anybody. And, if anybody ticked him off, he could have lobbed magic at them. But because we were able, by the circumstances of how he was living, to actually tone down everything about him, it made it a lot easier to integrate him, until the big reveal when, he goes full dragon on the guy who's stolen his mate.
Okay. Kiki.
I think for me, there's something about dragons that make them very open to loneliness. They just seem like lonely creatures, which when they get their mates in your books, that's just something that they cling on to, like Ari said. So putting the mate in risk is always a good way to bring a dragon down. there's also something that seems just very scarce about the population of dragons in the first place. I think in my books, the Jeweled King's Curses, well, I know in my books, there's just not very many of each kind of dragon left. And so you don't want to go about getting yourself in trouble, starting crap if there's not very many of you left. So that's the easiest way. Then the second easiest way to sort of bring that danger element is having dragons fight dragons, because then they've got the same skills and they can just.
Elle.
Yeah, similar to what Ari and Kiki have said. When they're in dragon form, I kind of do the trope of like, oh, they've got like the soft spot on the throat, where if you shoot right there, that could be a vulnerable part. But Everin is most of the time in book 1 trapped in his human form, which is unusual for him, and he's not very happy about it because he is like half bonded to this human. So it is sort of fated mates and like the soulmate bond, but with a bit of a twist, because it's sort of draining both of their magics and they have to learn to trust each other to complete it. The problem is once that happens, he's supposed to kill the human, but then oops, feelings. And through most of the book as well, the human actually has a bit more power. So like if they touch the dragon, it hurts him, which I didn't realize until halfway through was like accidentally quite kinky. So whoops.
Rachel.
Kind of like what Kiki was saying, there is some vulnerability through loneliness and scarcity. As Ari mentioned, Gus believes that he is the last dragon, like the last one. There are no more. And so he has been very careful about protecting himself. And yet where he chooses to hide is in a bar that he owns. And so he gets exposed to the rainbow of humanity every single day. And I think that helps integrate him not only into the world of the book, but also the world of the characters and also humanity itself. And that's where he can kind of learn that over the centuries of this, learn that sense of vulnerability and limited connection. Like that's his way of maintaining a connection to the outside world as best he can.
Okay. Alledria.
My dragon main character runs up against a creature called the Raven Witch, who is an exiled dragon, who basically takes his dragon form away. At which point you are now plopped down into human form without your abilities and have to figure out, how the devil do I stay alive long enough to achieve my goal?
That makes sense. Kiki's comment about the loneliness made me think of a cartoon I've seen with the knight in shining armor confronting the dragon who's clutching the maiden, and the dragon used the maiden to bait the knight in shining armor, drops the girl, grabs the knight, and they fly off to a happily ever after.
Yes.
Works for me. Now, is there a cost to your dragons for shifting? Like, can they only shift back and forth between dragon and human every so often? Like, does it deplete them? If they shift, do they immediately have all their powers, or do they kind of have to come online? Is there basically a cost or some sort of thing to work around when they shift to kind of balance out all that amazing power? Ari?
Oh yeah, for Gus, he can't shift if he doesn't have his horde. That's the whole thing. His horde also powers all of his magic, so when he uses his breath weapon, he's sacrificing a bit of the horde to fuel it. It's a very D&D thing. So there's that cost right away. We didn't put any other limitations, and he only shifts once in the book. So that's that wasn't something that we really had to address or think about. We may in a future book have to worry about something like that, but yeah, there's definitely a cost.
Okay. Kiki.
I was trying to think about it, and I don't think that there is one. I think in pretty much all of my shifter worlds, the only sort of change that they feel is sort of a freedom when they're in their animal or creature forms, but it's not something that drains any power on them or anything like that. But when they're in their dragon forms, they pretty much just have dragon abilities like strength, and they can fly, and there's like a couple other small ones, but my dragons don't have a lot of like other superpowers, I guess.
Okay. Elle.
Yeah, so the cost in book one is the fact that he's lost his dragon form, so that's left him pretty vulnerable. But for most dragons, shifting between dragon and human is pretty seamless in terms of energy. But because they're in this dying world, dragons also need to eat a lot of food. So quite a lot of them actually stay in the humanoid form more than they'd like, because they hate humans and everything they represent, but humans require less food. And that also ties into how humans use magic as well, because for dragons it's innate and for humans it's stolen and it's become corrupted. So if you use magic and you don't fuel yourself properly, you will basically turn like hangry times infinity, and you will turn into like a zombie briefly until you get your food. So if there's food around, you'll eat it. If your best friend is next to you, you will eat them.
I mean, I've known people like that, so that's not a
I mean,
strength.
I get very hangry myself, so that was the inspiration, but thankfully not that hangry.
Rachel.
Visibility. Dragons are big. As Ari mentioned, our dragon is the size of a 747. If he shifts, he's going to be seen, and that's the last thing that he wants. So yeah, that is a hindrance to him, and it because he considers himself the last dragon, he's got a vested interest in keeping as low a profile as possible. So shifting for him is not only the power drain if he gives up a little bit of his hoard, but it's also a problem in terms of maintaining his secrecy, his secret identity, as it were. You can't really do that when you're flying around the size of an airplane.
This is true. Alledria.
My dragon is not a classic shifter, so he's actually not able to move between human form and dragon form of his own volition. So when he becomes a human, he has to have help to do it. He also has to have help to turn back. He also has to have help to come back to being a human. So there is a very definite cost to that, because he has to have help for it.
Okay. Well, I now have a whole new slate of favorite dragons, so I can't wait to explore these. But believe it or not, we have run through our time. So before we wrap up, let's please let everybody tell folks where they can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, let us know. Ari?
So we can be found at arimckay.com and on Amazon, and all of our books are in Kindle Unlimited. So we can be found there. And I am on Facebook way too much. You can ask anybody in my family. I'm way too addicted to Facebook. Other than that, we our next release most likely will be part of the Carnival of Mysteries series that I'm coordinating with a bunch of authors. It's another shared element universe with a multiverse traveling magical carnival. So that will be coming out in summer of 2023.
And I'm right there with you on that one. So I can't wait to have that come out. Kiki.
You can find me at Kiki Burrelli, basically anywhere. KikiBurrelli.com is my website, and Instagram at Kiki Burrelli. Facebook, I have a reader group called Kiki Zen, and we have fun there. If you want to read my dragons, it's a complete series. It's called The Jeweled King's Curse, and that's available on Kindle Unlimited right now at Amazon. And then the book I just released is this one. Wait, is that right? Is that pointing at Thrust?
Yes.
Should be pointing at Thrust. that was the last book in my Lunar Wolves series, but there aren't any dragons in that. Sorry.
Okay. Al?
So I'm lrlam.co.uk. And then on Instagram and Twitter, I'm both LR_lam. And I am very slowly going to attempt TikTok this year. We'll see if it works. I haven't uploaded anything yet. And that annoyingly has to be _LR_lam because someone took the username. Darn it. And yeah, my next book is Dragonfall, which is out in May. And if you are a book reviewer / librarian / bookseller, it is on NetGalley and Edelweiss just now. And then will be hopefully available wherever books are sold. Very excited to be releasing a book when like bookstores are open now. That'll be nice. Last like 3 have been in like various states of closing things down. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, hold on to that.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, so links to all of our socials and our Amazon links are on our website, remckay.com. Our dragon book, let me go to, is Stop Dragging My Heart Around. And even though it is part of the Asheville Arcana series, it does work as a standalone. The first 3 books kind of build on each other, but Gus and Bear's story it's pretty self-contained. So if you're interested in that dragon, you can pick it up and don't have to worry about reading everything leading up to it.
Okay. Alledria?
You can find me at alledriahurt.com. I am generally, if you can spell my first name, you can find me anywhere on the internet. So I am fairly easy to find on that, although my Twitter is called Our Lady of Ashes. So that is the one outlier. And The Dragon Prince came out last year. This year in January, I am putting out a YA fantasy, YA sci-fi novel called Align.
Very nice. And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. If you spell the names right, you'll find me not only on the web pages, but on all my social media sites. And I'm on pretty much most of them. The new book that is coming out is Light My Way Home. It'll be a novella in the Treasure Trail series. And after that is Peacemaker, which is a brand new book in the Sharps and Springfield series, brand new series. So lots coming up. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.